you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kolel Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now. Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
So the difference between Operation
From Jerusalem, Jews around the world are still choosing Israel. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has more.
President Isaac Herzog visited the Jewish agency's Olpan Etzion Absorption Center in Jerusalem yesterday, meeting with new immigrants who have arrived even amid the ongoing conflict with Iran. According to the Jewish agency, more than 60,000 new immigrants have moved to Israel since October 7, 2023, a number that continues to grow despite security challenges. Standing inside the center, Herzog pointed to what he called a defining moment for the Jewish people, and said immigration to Israel is an expression of faith, hope, and the deep bond between the Jewish people and their state.
מי שעלה לפה צדק. מי שעלה לפה בזמן צדק. זה המקום להיות בו, זה המקום לבנות אותו ביחד.
The visit included a briefing on absorption efforts, language programs, and support systems designed to help newcomers integrate quickly into Israeli society. For many of the immigrants here, the decision to come was not delayed by war, but strengthened by it. Jewish Agency Chairman Doron Almog underscored that message directly.
אתם מנוע של תקווה, של עוצמה, אתם, כולכם.
At a time when Israel remains under threat on multiple fronts, officials say Aliyah is continuing to serve as both a demographic and symbolic boost. Herzog called it a direct response to Israel's enemies.
זה כוח אדיר, מטאפיזי, עצום, שמוביל עם שלם לחירות.
And for the families arriving now, the message is clear. Even in wartime, Israel remains not just a refuge, para home.
As the war rages on, uncertainty continues to plague Israelis as there is no clear indication as to when the war will be over. Here to give us an update on the flight situation is our ILTV correspondent, Devo Klein. Devo, what's the latest update on the flights?
Yes, Ivan, just coming on here real quick to give a brief update on the flight situation here in Israel. El Al, Israel's flagship carrier, have canceled their flights through to March 27th, their regularly scheduled flights. In addition, Israel have also canceled their flights through to March 31st. That means that many Israelis hoping to leave Israel for the Passover holiday coming up will likely not be able to do so. There are currently no alternatives, and we don't really know what's happening with international carriers. They have not resumed their flights, and we don't know when they will. El Al are, of course, offering reimbursements for those who have their flights canceled. These are the regularly scheduled flights. This is happening for a slew of reasons. The first being to make more room for these rescue flights and operations still ongoing, as many Israelis are still stranded abroad. And the second being the updated Home Front Command guidelines, as yesterday Ben Gurion Airport was the destination of an attack by the Islamic regime of ballistic missiles. 3 private jets were harmed in the missile barrage. No people were injured, but there was a lot of damage to the property, and the Home Front Command are now saying that it is unsafe in Ben Gurion Airport. That is all the updates we have, and we hope to have more for you soon.
Thank you, Devo.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Lidar Lazi, coming to you live from Israel with all of the biggest headlines from across the region.
You hear us?
Let's look at the latest developments at this hour. A very bloody 24 hours here in Israel as sirens have continued sounding throughout the day, warning of Iranian and Hezbollah missile attacks. Just a short while ago, sirens sounded in central Israel with multiple impact sites in Bat Yam and Holon, just south of Tel Aviv. Earlier in the day, there were impacts in Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, and Petah Tikva from a cluster bomb. 15 people were injured, among them one in serious condition. Meanwhile, in the north, Magen David Adom announced today that one person, a 60-year-old farmer, had been killed in a Hezbollah missile attack on the community of Misgav Am. This marks the first Israeli fatality from Hezbollah rocket or missile fire since the start of hostilities on February 28th. And overnight, 100 people were injured in Iranian missile attacks in the southern cities of Dimona and Arad, 11 of them in serious conditions after air defenses failed to intercept at least 2 ballistic missiles. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu toured the impact site in Arad this morning. Let's listen to what he had to say.
אנחנו פה בערד, קרה פה נס, אבל נס שאפשר היה לחסוך אותו. הנס הוא שאף אחד לא נהרג, אנחנו כאן במאבק על הקיום. כל העם חזית, זה אומר שהעורף חזית. ואני מבקש מכם פעם נוספת ללמוד את הלקחים. מאז תחילת המלחמה, מאיראן, בטילי איראן, נהרגו 15 איש. כל אחד מהם עולם ומלואו. אנחנו מצרים, מבקים כל אחד ואחד מהם. מעבר לזה אנחנו ממשיכים להילחם בנחישות באויב, עושים את זה ביתר שאת עם ידידינו האמריקנים. אנחנו שותפים מלאים, ואנחנו מכים בהם שוק על ירך, ונמשיך לעשות זאת עד שנשיג את כל מטרותינו. אנחנו מבקשים לייצר את התנאים שיאפשרו לעם האיראני לפרוק את העול של העריצות הזאת. אנחנו עושים דברים רבים, פוגעים במשטר הזה, סודקים אותו, פוגעים בו בצורות שהוא אפילו לא שיער, ויש עוד עבודה לעשות. אני מקווה שנשיג ניצור את התנאים האלה שיאפשרו לשינוי משטר, אבל הגדרנו, אנחנו רוצים פשוט לרסק להם את תוכנית הגרעין, ואנחנו עושים את זה, לרסק להם את תוכנית הטילים, ואנחנו עושים את זה, לרסק להם את היכולת לייצר גרעין וטילים, ואנחנו עושים את זה, ועוד היד נטויה.
ליל הסדר מתקרב, מה אמר?
And emergency services continue to respond across the country as missile threats persist into the 4th week of the war with Iran. Joining us now with more on the strike in Arad is Naomi Tivon Galiano, a United Hatzalah volunteer, an EMT who was on the scene in Arad. Naomi, thank you so much for joining us today. So the strike in Arad is one of the hardest we've seen, at least in scale, in this round of war with Iran. Can you share with us what you saw there on the scene? Technical difficulties with Naomi, so we will try and come back to her later this hour. So in the meantime, we want to continue on with the latest updates. It's day 23 of the war with Iran. The IDF conducted waves of airstrikes in Tehran and western Iran. The IDF says Israeli Air Force jets hit dozens of sites linked to Iran's ballistic missile program, including IRGC complexes, missile fuel facilities, component factories, and air defense systems. Targets east of Tehran included storage sites for ballistic missile launchers where operatives were present. The IDF says it had identified Iranian operatives preparing missile launches. Earlier, the IDF said the Israeli Air Force struck a nuclear weapons research and development facility in Tehran. The target was located within Malek Ashtal University, which the IDF says was used to develop both nuclear weapons components and ballistic missiles. The IDF says Israeli Air Force jets carried out a wave of strikes in Tehran, targeting dozens of sites linked to Iran's ballistic missile program. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir says the military is about halfway through its campaign against Iran, with the direction clear as operations continue towards Passover. In a video statement, Zamir says weeks of
לטווח של 4,000 קילומטרים לעבר מטרה אמריקאית באי דייגו גרסיה. טילים אלו לא נועדו לפגוע בישראל. הטווח שלהם מגיע לבירות אירופה. ברלין, פריז ורומא, כולן נמצאות בטווח איום ישיר. למדנו מההיסטוריה העולמית והיהודית שהכחשת איום או התרפסות בפניו לא מעלימה אותו. להפך, היא מקרינה חולשה ומדרבנת משטרים קיצוניים.
Okay, and at this hour, we'd like to go back to Naomi, a United Hatzalah volunteer. Let's see if we can hear her now. Naomi, are you with us? Okay, so we hear you now. So listen, Naomi, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, we know that you were on the scene in Arad, the strike in Arad, one of the most difficult scenes that we've seen this round of war with Iran, at least in scope. I mean, can you share with us what you saw there on the scene?
Yes, this is not my first scene. I was also on a few of the scenes in the last war with Iran, in Tel Aviv, in Petah Tikva. I think this struck me the most because it was so different in the type of the community there. It's a bunch of buildings, old buildings, a lot of people from very low socioeconomical situation, a lot of young families. And when we got there, it was a mass of young people, young families, babies crying. It was so different from other scenes that you get. And you see people panicked and you see injured, but you don't expect and you don't prepare yourself to see this amount of young people, of little children, of little babies. And I think it was a bit harder than usual.
And we certainly heard there were a lot of young children that were among the injured. Now, you know, did they simply not adhere to home front commands? Were there simply no shelters in the area? I mean, how was it that there was so much damage inflicted?
So Arad is one of the cities that is less developed in Israel. The majority of the population there is very young people with not a lot of money, so the buildings are very, very old. Even the local shelters there are not that, most of them were not renovated during the past few years. So most of the people were in a safe place. I think because of most of the people were in the safest place it could be, we didn't see any dead people, which was incredible. We expected to come to a scene in this type of area with a majority of killed, and we had no killing, nothing, no one died. I think it's a big miracle. Most of the people listened to the instructions and were in the safest place it could be in these circumstances. Even if it's in an old place, an old shelter, not exactly renovated, but it did save their life.
And I see that you're at the national headquarters for United Hatzalah. And so I want to ask, from the moment that you receive a notification that there was a hit, can you share with us, what happens from that moment?
Yes, so I am currently in Jerusalem, but I live in Sderot. It's more south. It's more or less an hour from Arad. We got the call that was a hit in Arad. In that moment, I opened the radio, the special United Hatzalah radio. I contacted teams of that lives around me. We gathered together 4 people with equipment, with everything we have. We have special cars, United Hatzalah cars, that allowed us to drive a little bit faster with sirens as emergency givers. And that's what we did. In a few minutes, we were on the car on our way to Arad. And a drive that usually takes about an hour, it took us almost like 45 minutes to get to the scene. So yeah, it's pretty chaotic. The minute we hear something happening and the minute we understand we really need our help, we just leave everything we have, everything we're doing, and we're going. It's a matter of a few seconds with that decision and going down to the house.
All right. Well, Naomi, thank you so much for joining us at this hour and for all of the life-saving work that you and that United Hatzalah volunteers are doing.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And back to Operation Epic Fury, U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to obliterate Iran's power plants if Iran does not fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours. In a social media post overnight, Trump warned the U.S. would strike major energy infrastructure, marking a sharp escalation, just one day after he spoke about winding down the war. U.S. warplanes and attack helicopters have intensified strikes on Iran's drones, naval vessels, and coastal facilities in a push to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which is a key global energy route. Now, CENTCOM Commander Brad Cooper said the United States has eliminated over 8,000 targets, including 130 Iranian vessels, dealing what he calls the largest naval blow since World War II. Reports also indicate the United States struck the Natanz nuclear enrichment facility, using bunker buster bombs to disrupt Iran's nuclear program. The IDF says it did not conduct any strikes in Natanz and cannot comment on U.S. actions. And in another major development, Iran reportedly fired 2 ballistic missiles at the UK-US base on Diego Garcia. The attack failed, but the launch strike demonstrates Iran's missile range can now reach European cities. And according to President Trump's statement on Truth Social, the U.S. is very close to meeting objectives in Iran, including degrading missile capabilities, destroying defense industrial bases, eliminating Navy and Air Force assets, and preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear capability. Now, President Trump urged countries using the Strait of Hormuz to police it themselves, saying the U.S. would help if needed, but would not take primary responsibility. This after in an earlier post he called his NATO allies cowards. And so joining us now with the latest on Operations Roaring Lion and Epic Fury are Dr. Eric Mandel, founder and director of MEPIN, and Brigadier General Hanan Geffen, former commander of 8200 Intelligence Unit in the IDF. Thank you both for joining us at this hour.
Thank you.
So, Eric, let's start with you. U.S. President Donald Trump has given Iran an ultimatum. Open the Strait of Hormuz or else face obliteration of its energy infrastructure. I mean, what do you make of this threat?
This is a very, very dangerous game of brinkmanship over the Straits of Hormuz, over Karg Island, over energy infrastructure. And I hope my administration realizes that in dealing here, and the threats, both public and things obviously going on we don't know about in private, that we're not dealing with a regime that makes decisions based upon Western logic. They base it upon revolutionary jihadist Shia mindset. And it is not that they're irrational or illogical, but they don't think like we do. And Iran still thinks that it can win by just outlasting us. It thinks, and I think what it is doing is pacing its munitions. I think it's trying to psychologically terrorize Israelis. I think what it is doing to Americans is to kill Americans, to decrease public support, obviously increase the gas prices. And a war of attrition for Iran is a war of survival. And the longer it goes, the longer Iran thinks it can end up. And when I say Iran, I always want to refer, we're talking about the regime, not the Iranian people. And at the end game regarding the Straits of Hormuz, no way can this at the end have Iran in charge of veto opening and closing the Straits of Hormuz at any time of their choosing. And I think the president is correct that countries that benefit from fossil fuels going through the Straits of Hormuz should help safeguard it. And I believe that we're going to need many destroyers if we have convoys going. I think you may need almost as many destroyers as tankers as they transit the Straits of Hormuz. I think U.S. naval protection should only be afforded to those countries that use it and are contributing both rhetorically, but also with whatever they can with minesweepers or frigates or littoral ships that will be helpful to us.
Now, Hanan, turning to you, we heard President Trump saying that he's considering winding down this war. Then, of course, he issued this ultimatum. But we also heard from the Israeli side. We heard IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir estimating that we're only halfway through this war. Now, here in Israel, we really are feeling the effects. Missiles launched constantly at the Israeli home front. We saw, mass injuries and damages in the last 24 hours. How much longer can the regime keep this up? And is it possible to truly diminish all of their missile capabilities, as both the United States and Israel have set as a war objective?
Well, that's the question that most of us, all of us, I would say Israelis have right now in our minds. And I would say in Hebrew, we say, En Brera, we don't have a choice. Because as the war goes on, more and more, we in the world, getting acquainted with the Iranians, their real intentions. Diego Garcia attacked by missile 4,000 kilometers range, which can reach any capital in Europe, which was denied just weeks ago by the Iranian authorities. We have noticed the Iranian trying to reach some kind of nuclear capabilities, quick nuclear capabilities, terrorizing a whole region. What the Israelis claim were, and the American claims were, for the last 47 years, the Americans are the big Satan, and we are the small Satan, and Death to America was chanting already 50 years ago in Tehran, this regime. Now, this all around us, getting to know this regime, and just to mention, then it's one of the already biggest failures of the Iranians, and they know it, is the rift between them and the Muslim and Arab world, and them and the Gulf states, which they from day one of the revolution, taken by Khamenei, tried to have the support of the Muslim and Arab worlds, and now they are getting away from them. Just 2 days ago, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia announced that they are standing together against Iran, which is, and Turkey, in other words, said the same things in different language. So wrapping it all up, Israel is not standing alone against this regime state, but Israel has the most to lose, because we are the one that were threatened by Khamenei every year on what he called Jerusalem Day, that the day of Israel is coming. He quoted the year 2035, 2028, quoting days, the day Israel will perish. So we remember it. Now we started through this war, but we didn't start it. We didn't start at the 7th of October, but we have to get out of this war. Many of us described it as a second independence war. We cannot leave it with a discussion between Foreign Minister Arakci and Mr. Witkoff or Kushner. That's not a way that we can live with it. And getting back to Embera, we don't have a choice but to get this nuclear threat at least, and the ballistic threat, and the slogans and the policies of this regime getting out of the way. No more. Iran can survive whatever they like, but no threat to Israel and the neighborhood.
So, Eric, turning to you, I mean, we heard now from Hanan, who's talking about the threat and also the involvement of the Gulf states in this conflict. And, you know, we also now see that Iran is capable of launching missiles at a great distance, as Hanan said, to reach even Europe. What do we know about their intermediate range ballistic missiles and Europe's response to this?
Before we get to that, I just wanted to touch on what Hanan said. From the Gulf perspective, they fear probably that the worst possible scenario is the regime survives as a wounded animal. An undefeated Iran regime is the worst possible scenario. And Iran sees the countries in the Gulf as an Achilles heel, because they can't pack up. The UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia can't go to someplace else, and they don't trust my country for our staying power. We don't have a good history in the Middle East. These people think in decades and centuries. We think in weeks and months, and they don't believe that we can prevent Iran from rebuilding. As far as our European friends, I think there's a lot of animosity to the president, who challenged them that they were not paying their fair share for NATO. And I think that the Europeans have, if you will, from the president's point of view, been kind of freeloaders on American protection. But in specific, the world, since World War II, the freedom of the seas, the policing of the seas, has been an American and an objective, and the whole world has relied on the United States. And right now, when you're dealing with an international waterway, the Straits of Hormuz, for European countries to not go full on to be involved here, because this is not offensive, this is defensive. This is an international waterway. This cannot be left to stand. And what will happen at the end here, this is not going to be resolved in days or weeks. There's going to be need to have international supervision to keep the Straits of Hormuz open for years going forward. And we saw by Bab el-Mandeb on the other side is also a vulnerable point. We saw what the Houthis can do with that. We saw when the Suez Canal was closed. So again, the opening of international waterways, if the Europeans aren't going to be on board here, that is, again, we should not use our soldiers to be put in harm's way and our ships if they're not going to join, at the very least symbolically.
And Hanan, I'd like to hear your analysis of this as well in terms of, you know, Europe and its involvement, or we should say lack of involvement in this war, especially now that we see that Iran does have the ability to target European cities.
Yeah, that's a question that I would say all the Middle East dwellers are asking. Where's Britain? Where's Great Britain? They have been the superpower 50, 60 years ago. French, Sykes-Picot, they have divided the Middle East. They are out of the way. They are not players anymore. And every day passes, they are less relevant to this area. There are countries that will be much more relevant. I would say like countries like Indonesia, countries that were on the sidelines. President Trump very skillfully asking this country join hands to create a different Middle East, a new Middle East. And Europe is, they have some of them privately or bilaterally telling Israel this or that, but not as a group and not as a NATO. So they are not every day. Let's sum it up. They are less relevant to the Middle East. What happened in the Middle East? What will happen in the Middle East? The only thing that I would say that as a military spectator, I'm so pleased. I don't hear them yet calling for ceasefire. They understand that the problem is much bigger than border skirmishes. It's much broader than that. That at least we can understand the way they are acting, but they are not. They are losing their weight and their standing in the Middle East. No doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. And Eric, turning back to you, you mentioned troops on the ground, whether you meant to say that or not, but we're hearing reports that over 2,000 U.S. Marines are on their way to the Middle East as we speak. What do you make of this? And do you think the U.S. is laying the foundation, or President Trump is laying the foundation, maybe preparing the public for some kind of potential ground operation?
Well, I think it's more than 2,000. Initially, 2,200
an additional, yeah.
We're going to have an additional 2,000. And once you do have boots on the ground, whether we're talking Carg Island or along the straits, this dramatically increases them being put in harm's way, because you're now playing on somebody else's turf, and you're going to have to protect them. They're going to be entrenched. There are quite a few missions that they can do. Carg Island is one people thinking about. There's the Straits of Hormuz. Also, the 440 kilograms of enriched uranium that's sitting partially in tunnels in Isfahan, and some believe in Taz. And so maybe I'll give you, to answer this, how much time the president has to do this. I'll give you a pulse of America right now. There was a poll this weekend by CBS, and it's totally contradictory where Americans are. We know where Israelis are. This is a war Israel must fight. It's an existential war against Iran. But Americans, on one hand, say 75% approve of this war if it lasts only weeks, and that drops into the 40s if it has to last months. It's all one side. 84% of Republicans and over 90% of MAGA are for the war, 8% of Democrats and only 31% of independents. And then when you ask Americans what the end game is here, it's very easy if you're an Israeli and what the end game is. You would like to have regime change, and obviously regime collapse does not necessarily mean a regime change for the better. But you ask Americans, 80% want Iranians to be free, and 73% of Americans want the end of a nuclear Iran, but 92% want to leave as soon as possible, which is very American, and the Iranians know this, and they play that against us.
Mm-hmm. And Hanan, I do want to talk a little bit about the differences here between Israel and the United States. But before we go into that, we can't ignore also, Iran is certainly paying a very heavy price in this war, but Israel is as well. And the past 24 hours, we saw a failure of the missile defense system twice, both in Arad and Dimona. And it seems as though more missiles are making it through these past couple days than in the initial stages of the war. So I want to hear your analysis on why that is. I mean, what you can tell us about that.
Well, first of all, we have 3 different layers of protection. One of it, and the most important one, is the one that both American and Israeli pilots are attacking and targeting the launchers from day one. These were the first and foremost targets, and still are. Getting out as much as possible, launcher possible, protecting not only Israel, but the Gulf state and other areas, including Cyprus, and for that matter. The second layer is a huge protection system that was coordinated by the United States Central Command. CENTCOM was General Kurilla started it. Admiral Cooper is going on, connecting all the networks, protection network of the Middle East, of the countries in the Middle East with the Israeli one. And then with the Israeli very developed system. And the third one is the population. The very population should be very observant and to the alerts, early alerts. We have as often as much as 10 minutes alert. And whenever we do obey, then the only will be damage, superficial damage, not in men or injured. I already mentioned this is this smartphone is our best friends. We're getting it, the early alerts, they're calling by neighborhood, by city, go into shelter. 10 million people, 10 million Israelis for the last, I would say, 2 years are obeying it. And so far, and thank God, the casualties we have, every casualty, we are mourning it, but are much less than the enemies planned for. Iranian by now, or the Hezbollah for that matter, planned for hundreds of missiles targeting Israel, hundreds of buildings, high-rising building falling, thousands of people killed. We are not at that point. So it's the home front, the resilience of the home front. Everybody, Israelis, knows it. And when we didn't obey it, just bypass it, we see what happened in Dimona and in Arad. And the mayor said there was disobedience. People were not, either were tired or I don't know what the reason. But whenever they are adhering to the orders or these alerts, a life can be saved and wounded, it can be prevented. And it's important because we need the time to get over with this war.
Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the head with Israeli resilience. Dr. Eric Mandel, Brigadier General Hanan Geffen, thank you both so much for joining us at this hour.
Thank you very much.
And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel in the heart of the Middle East. I'm Ladar Lazi. Thank you so much for...
So the difference between Operation Rising Lion in June is that we knocked out and we really rolled back their nuclear program and capabilities. Operation Roaring Lion, which is what we're in right now, is we are targeting the Ayatollah regime that puts the money, that puts the funding, that puts the research into this nuclear program. But we have to talk about the Ayatollah regime a little bit more expansive. We're not just going after their capabilities with their nuclear program, it's their ballistic missile programs, and it's all of their military infrastructure.
Hello and welcome to the ILTV podcast. I'm Mayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV, and I'm so happy to have back our viewers and our listeners. Now, we are still in an ongoing war with Iran, and therefore I've brought today Shosh Bedrosian, the spokeswoman for the Prime Minister's office. Welcome, Shosh.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Now, Shosh, we are around 3 weeks into this war, and we have been fighting nonstop, and we've also been receiving, of course, missile attacks launched at us from Iran. Very dangerous for the people. At this stage, how is the Prime Minister's office defining victory? When will we be done?